Candace Owens is the black white supremacist.
Black men, 6% of the population, account for
44%
of all murders in this country.
And as hilarious and insane as that is, it's not even the most backwards thing about her.
Amen.
I've never in my life seen someone so willing to throw their own under the bus for a group of hateful morons that obviously don't respect them.
The Brits invading Africa, it ended up being a net positive.
So I've spent the past 2 months torturing myself watching her god-awful content, trying to figure out why she chooses to be like this. And I found a lot. Most of it is hilarious, but all of it is kind of fucked up.
Black Americans do not know how to resolve basic conflicts. Everything has to turn into a fight. I hate you forever. You gotta draw lines. It's like you're this gang or that gang.
For the blessed few of you who don't know, Candace Owens is a far-right political pundit. She's been on Fox News a bunch of times. She's worked with political organizations like Turning Point USA and the Daily Wire.
Beat it up, N-word. Catch a charge.
Where she had classic segments like Why I Used to Support Gay Rights and my personal favorite, Juneteenth is Ghetto and Made Up.
This holiday is ghetto and, in fact,
made up.
Candace, all holidays are made up. That's how they work. See, when Candace first came on the scene, the racist Republicans loved her because she was saying publicly all the hateful up shit they've been saying privately for years. And she got to say it on the biggest news network in the country under the guise of helping her own people.
Victimhood has become almost a mental plague upon Black America in particular.
I gotta give it to the Repubs. Their plot was genius. The only issue was that their DEI hire is a moron.
I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a
round earther.
Because Candace is constantly saying shit that's not just borderline evil, but just factually inaccurate. And she's proven that with the way she processes information, she's only gonna get more and more unhinged. Let me explain.
why would a black person want to report racistly on another black person?
If there's one thing we can count on Candace Owens to do, it's to say a bunch of dumb shit that's obviously wrong. Like saying with a straight face that the NRA was created to help defend black people against the Klan.
I know that the NRA was started as a civil rights organization, training Black Americans to arm themselves and defend themselves against the KKK.
Now that does sound like the plot to an excellent Denzel Washington movie, but unfortunately, it's not real. The truth is that the NRA was created by a group of Union soldiers who discovered during the Civil War that they couldn't shoot for shit. So they started a little gun club to focus on their aim. Nothing to do with saving black people. But I'm sure that's a cute little story to tell your ignorant ass fans to make them feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Or the time Candace said this ignorant shit about her own ancestors.
slaves built this country, slaves built this country, slaves built this country. Everything that we have, we owe to slavery and slaves, and this is an argument for reparations. We've heard this nonsense over and over again from people who've never bothered to open a history book, or maybe they have actually. Maybe it's because they've opened history books in school that they learn this garbage nowadays. Actually, I would say it is because they open history book and they learn this garbage.
Did you notice how in real time she went from it's because they don't read history books to maybe it's because they do to no, it's definitely because they do read history books. Watch out for people who do that because they're usually fucking stupid. Speaking of stupid and uninformed, I think we can all agree that America is in its misinformation arc. We have a lot of different articles and political pundits that are very opinionated and have no issue leaving out crucial information that would change your mind on a given topic. That's why it was so important for me to have Ground News be the sponsor of today's video. Ground News is a website you to I've come to expect from these people. The main reason I made this video was not only to make fun of Candace, but to point out the fact that she is a huge proponent of this exact thing. Having a very strong but baseless opinion and never really trying to hear from the other side. And every single time she's been proven wrong, she blocks the people that corrected her and doubles down on her nonsense. Always to the detriment of her audience. It's exactly this type of behavior that we get from our political pundits that causes so much hatred and division in this country. Division and hatred based off of lies most of the time. We know that Candace will never do an accurate segment on these Jack Smith filings feelings because instead she wants to make 16 segments about why Kamala Harris isn't black. Candace, this is Kamala's dad. Move on, alright? This is pathetic, even for you. It's this mistrust we have in our media that's caused Ground News to create its blind spot feature, which shows you articles that have little to no coverage by one side of the political aisle. This is a great tool to make sure you're able to see what kind of information both sides are getting and can help us all stay away from the political extremes on both sides. It's apparent to me that Candace is the perfect representation of everything wrong with political media in 2024, and I truly believe that Ground News is a great solution to help us protect ourselves from people like her. So go ahead and check them out at ground.news/.
Saying that the majority of people did not have slaves. Obviously, a very small fraction of uber wealthy people had slaves. People that were fighting the Civil War, it was a poor man's fight and a rich man's war. They were not fighting to keep slavery in place. They didn't have slaves.
To correct her ignorant ass statement, it wasn't some small group that owned slaves. When you consider the amount of people that either owned slaves or were part of an immediate family that owned slaves, the percentages are more like 30 to 50% depending on the state. Also, I know you're not supposed to say slave anymore, so I'd like to make a formal apology to my mother and Kendrick Lamar. I'm sorry.
Obviously, we all know slavery was abhorrent. It was an abhorrent practice all over the world, did not begin in America, and actually did not begin with white people, right? It still goes on today, and it is black and brown people that keep those institutions up, and actually white people were the first people to end the institutions of slavery. France, the United Kingdom, followed by
1804. She's completely wrong again. First of all, dumbass, Haiti was the first country in the Americas to ban slavery, which they did in 1804. History lesson, history lesson. And the truth is that America wasn't one of the first countries to ban slavery. It was actually one of the last. Every single country on screen right now banned slavery before the US did. Maybe you should pick up one of those history books so you can refrain from humiliating yourself. I don't know if they teach this on PragerU.com, but these are the facts. I don't think anyone's trying to say that slavery is the sole reason for every single American accomplishment, but to act like it wasn't a huge factor of our country's success is just ignorant and a very weird thing to try so hard to deny, especially for a color. But white people don't feel excluded, okay? Because black history is just one of the many things Candace doesn't know shit about. Look at how this clown embarrasses herself trying to prove that Donald Trump single-handedly saved America.
I think if Donald Trump did not win the election, we would have lost America. I genuinely believe lost it. Like Hillary.
And I can't not bring up the fact that Donald Trump, her angelic leader, is the one who incited an insurrection against the government. But we're gonna lose the country to Hillary Clinton. I know he hadn't done it at this point, but I'm still gonna bring it up because it's insane.
Do I believe in climate change? No.
Okay, but this is an incredibly complicated subject.
Right.
And if you would have to talk to a bunch of different scientists and see how they gather data. Have you done all this, or
No,
do you
so I
take
think
this flippant opinion based
listen,
on the party line?
this wouldn't be the hill I died on, right? But it's not about the party. I just genuinely, I've read a ton about it, but I would not be able to come to you and say, like, this is my strong opinion.
Okay, so you refuse to give any credence to something that 97% of scientists and most people in the world believe in. Then you say, I've read a ton about it, but can't, like, say my strong opinion. Hey, Candace, purveyor of truth and seeker of knowledge, if you don't know why you believe in something, and that belief is in opposition with almost every single human being that's ever researched that topic, how about next time, instead of bringing up your ignorant ass opinions on the biggest platform in the world, you instead shut the fuck up. I'm Kamal and I approve this message. But honestly, what more should we expect from a grown woman that says unironically that they have left the cult of science?
I am somebody who has left the cult of science. I have left the mega church of science.
It's almost impressive to say something that objectively stupid. Almost.
Because what I have now realized is that science, what it is actually, if you think about it, is a
Pagan faith.
Holy shit, and it just keeps getting worse by the second. Pagan faith? I honestly don't think she could have picked worse words to describe science. Because there is zero faith in science. Kind of the whole point. For something to be scientific, it means it has to be able to be proven and repeatable, but I'm sure the more she talks, the more sense she's gonna make, right?
Is a pagan faith. I'm gonna give you an example of exactly what it is I'm talking about.
In case you think you disagree.
A woman tweeted this. You may have seen me retweet this over the weekend. Her name is Beth. She wrote this. Years ago, I was assured that an IUD was safe, effective, and could be removed at any point if I decided on having more children. It was FDA approved, after all. Ovarian cysts, surgery, infections, a week in the hospital, and infertility. That was what they meant by safe and effective.
So your evidence to prove that IUDs are not 99% effective and that all the statistics and science behind it are a lie is a random tweet from 4 years ago. Got it. And I'm not even saying you're wrong. Well, I mean, I kinda am, but let's be real, I'm not gonna be Mr. Know-It-All when it comes to women's birth control. But I'm sure that we can all agree that a tweet with 0 likes from Beth_EK probably isn't the best evidence out there to prove that we've all been indoctrinated into the cult of science.
I am grateful for having gone through the school of hard knocks because you are required to have an element of common sense in order to survive. And when I look at people and they hold on to what the
Common
doctor said this, what the experts said this.
And they're gonna hold on to what this fucking retard said? What this low IQ fucking imbecile said? Okay.
I know that.
Oh shit, hold on.
Say something that objectively stupid. Almost. Because it's insane.
Do I believe in climate change?
Incredibly easy to manipulate.
Can't articulate it when somebody explains to me, well, the moon landings definitely happened because this, and the firmament, and they could get, and I'm just like, no, I don't know, instinctually, it just doesn't.
Instinctually. God, she's just fucking retarded. I mean, even as like a political stupid fucking tool, she is retarded. Like, you were talking about common sense, like this fucking stupid bitch was talking about common sense earlier, and now she's like, oh yeah, the moon landing didn't happen. But then why didn't the Soviets say shit about it? Why didn't they accept? Like, why did they accept it? Why did they say, oh yeah, this was moon landing didn't like? Why did they accept the moon landing happened when it's like not in their interest to do so? Like, look at her stupid face here too. Like, gosh, she's such a fucking moron.
Doesn't register to me. It just feels like that is
instinctively
a lie.
Well,
a lie
mean,
feels instinctively.
You heard her say it. When people come to Candace with information and data and reasons for why things happen, Candace says,
I don't feel like it.
I just feel like no. What do you even say?
Yeah, like I don't really have to like just watch the entire video. Candace is just genuinely retarded. She's a very low-hanging fruit, but at this point, there's way too many fucking low-hanging fruits. The whole tree's coming down.
Hey, how you doing?
Horrible, and a lot of it is your fault. But do you want to? Or here, we'll get into it. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick so everybody knows who you are? And
yeah, no, seriously, it's horrible because of my fault. What's up?
Oh, sorry, it was tongue in cheek. I've been so steeped in a lot of the January 6th stuff. It has made me so incredibly and unimaginably frustrated. But like following these conversation lines down with people is just insane. But yeah.
You mean debating like conspiracy theorists and that kind of thing, or? Yeah,
and the lack of information that people seem to know about anything involved with everything. Yeah. But yeah,
I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm Tom Jocelyn. I was a senior professional staff member on the January 6th committee, and I was the principal drafter of the committee's final report. Before that, I had a career in counterterrorism and
Wife
counter-extremism for a
terrorist.
number of
Wives
years.
killed.
I was actually an economist. So
Thing about Jeffrey Clark and the DOJ or anything like there are so many pieces where I was just so ignorant, and yeah.
Steve
well, I
killed all
mean, you know, that's
Steve
that's
nuked the
okay.
wife.
I mean, look, I
nuked
mean,
the fucking
from my
wife stuff through him.
perspective, one of the things about January 6th is that January 6th itself, the date, that day, that was the culmination of a plot to overturn the election, right? It wasn't solely about that day. There was a number of steps before that that culminated on that day. And as Donald Trump got increasingly desperate in trying to figure out a way to stay in power, his efforts really became to focus on January 6th. But prior to that, he had all sorts of other steps he tried to do to overturn his election loss. And one of the things that I discovered throughout this whole process is that a lot of Americans are not really familiar with the Electoral College process. And how that works. You know, a lot of people think you just kind of go and you vote, and the popular vote determines, you know, who wins and who loses. And there's really this Electoral College process that, in my opinion, is arcane and antiquated. It's sort of tacked on to the popular vote process between when the votes are cast and counted and when the official winner of the election is certified and ultimately inaugurated, right? And so what Trump and his advisors did was they found all these steps in the Electoral College process, and they tried to figure out a way to undo those steps or interrupt those steps or subvert those steps in the process. And so when you talk about like the fake electors, that was just a parallel reality that they built where they wanted to keep open this idea that Trump really could have won the election, and they were going to have these fake electors. And ultimately, the fake electors became a pretext to obstruct the joint session of Congress on January 6th, you know.
Yeah. So one of the projects that I have is hopefully coming to completion is I wanted to make a long video kind of explaining everything that happened. And it's funny because you're saying things that are things that I've exactly said, that January 6th is not really that important.
A madness that, you know, the crowd has no right to summon a mob to Washington and tell them to march on the Capitol. We can get into what he actually did tell them and didn't tell them, but
yeah, I didn't mean to say that the day was irrelevant, just that like it's like you said, it's the culmination. Like if I really wanted to explain how horrible J6 was, that's going to be the day itself is the least I'm going to talk about. It's going to be all the stuff leading up to it.
Well, I mean, you mentioned like the fake electors, and one of the things, if you go through the sort of how that part of the scheme, I mean, one of the ways to think about this, and other people have used this analogy, so I'm not original in saying this, but one of the ways to think about this is like a spoke and wheel scheme. You know, so there are different spokes on the scheme, the January 6th wheel, so to speak, of how to overturn the election. And one of them is the fake electors. You know, that's one of the big ones, and it's integrated into the other parts of the scheme. One of the things that becomes clear from the record is that the fake elector effort, the people who are actually schemed it up, you know, really dreamt it up and came up with it and put it into action, knew it was all about obstructing the certification of Joe Biden's victory on January 6th, right? There was no other real legal or political justification for the fake elector effort. This is a key point that was missed in a lot of the commentary on this, you know, because you'll see sort of lawyers argue, well, you know, in case Trump somehow did win one of his court efforts in one of the states and they overturn the outcome, then they need to have the electors ready just in case of that event, so that way they could be counted. But the people who actually came up with the scheme, that's not what they were doing, right? The evidence is that they put it in writing. We know that they weren't counting on any court decision overturning the outcome in any state. The fake electors were purely about obstructing Joe Biden's victory on January 6th. That's what it was all about. And there were different ways they could be implemented or used on January 6th, but that was what it was all about.
Yeah. Just as a quick aside, my stream for this is live, so you know. It's not pre-recorded.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
I didn't know that, but that's fine.
Yeah, just let you know.
It's great. Well, hi to everybody out there. I didn't do it.
Yeah, you're good. I just want to say that just in case. And then on the second thing, the one of the frustrating things, and I don't know if you argue, you mentioned that maybe you've argued with people in real life about this. It's frustrating because people they'll simultaneously justify like an insurrection or a coup, and then they'll say it didn't happen, right? They'll say things like, well, the fake electors, I mean, like, they were never going to actually use these, of course not. But they had to have them because the election was stolen and the states weren't doing anything about it, and they needed a way to, you know, counter these things. And it's like, okay, wait, so it sounds like you're justifying Mike Pence basically choosing the president, right? Because you think it was a stolen election. Like, well, no, like, not like that. Like, they always, like, play both sides of it. It's very frustrating when you argue with people about it, yeah.
You're talking about the cognitive dissonance, and I've dealt with this quite a bit. I mean, they can have it's the same thing. We'll say, well, it was all deep state set up because they wanted Trump's patriots to be tricked into storming the Capitol and attacking police, so that way they could, crack down on them. But by the same token, it wasn't really that violent, and there really wasn't anything that happened that day that's really a concern. I mean, it's the same type of cognitive dissonance, right? And a big part of it, we can get into this if you want to talk about it, but my whole theory of what actually has happened here is that Trump, more than any other political figure in my lifetime, really did harness the power of the conspiracy web, the conspiracy internet. And what you'll find is that, if you study conspiracy theories, there are plenty of conspiracy theories that have like a handful of facts that are interesting or a handful of unknowns, and then they kind of apply all this thinking or assumptions on top of it to turn it into a conspiracy theory, right? And a lot of times those are nonsense and they don't really add up either. But, a lot of times conspiracy theories at least have something. There's some fact somewhere that somebody's glomming onto, right? What you're dealing with the conspiracy web is a rabid conspiracism. It's just a reflexive belief in anything that's anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-media, anti-democrat, anti-this, anti-that. They're just willing to believe anything. And so, you could have people to this day. I mean, you saw in Pennsylvania, I think it was in Pennsylvania, Elon Musk got on stage and was repeating the Dominion voting systems.
Still.
Smear. Yeah, still. I mean, let's talk about how stupid this is, right? I mean, this is a guy who's posting videos on X of rockets being, brought back to Earth and systematically put back in their silo. Pretty cool technology, right? Reusing the boosters and that kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. That's far afield for me, but it looks pretty cool to me anyway, right? But he's doing all this kind of cool tech stuff, and meanwhile, he's repeating one of the dumbest conspiracies about
he's not
January
doing any
6th
of it,
and
though.
voting
He's
in
just
our country.
just owns the company.
If you're a prophet of high technology, which Elon Musk is with Tesla and the electric cars and these rockets and everything else, how can you be this stupid to believe or to go
he's just
forward
the
with
owner.
this?
I think
it's not even a theory.
I think the whole
Dominion
Elon
voting
Musk is
systems
smart thing. He's
something
just code.
suspect about him. I mean, vote machine technology is about as simple as it gets, right? I mean, you're counting votes, and we have the paper ballots. And oh, by the way, in late 2020, when these myths were being spread online, they actually hand counted the ballots in places like Antrim County, Michigan, across all of Georgia, right? And what did they find? That the machines were accurate, And here's this guy repeating this nonsense to this day. And by the way, hand counting is less accurate than machine counting. You can figure out why that is. But so what is Elon Musk doing? I don't think he's dumb enough to believe this, or maybe he is, but I don't think he is, right? I think he's catering to the same sort of audience online that really is willing to believe anything. There's this well of credulity out there,
It could be that too.
One of the big things that I talk about, and it sucks to talk about it because it's like when you say misinformation is a huge problem, everybody says that. But like half the people that say it are the ones that are the worst perpetrators of misinformation. And I think one of the things that surprised me coming into, when I was like, okay, I'm gonna read the whole 840 pages of this J6 stuff because let's see, I think I was arguing with a friend over did Donald Trump abdicate his duty on J6. I'm like, I don't know. Was it really his responsibility? And it was a huge argument we had there where I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That kind of was the inciting moment for me to read the whole thing. And the thing that surprises me is usually when you've got stuff like this, you're relying on like a sequence of events that's really hard to explain without a conspiracy, or maybe like deposition or testimony from like one person that's like, oh, that's kind of worth looking into. This stuff there's an abundance of it's so much. It's so much from from conservatives, from Republicans, and the other side is not denying any of it. It's like,
I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, well, first of all, it happened all in front of our eyes, right?
Yeah, that too.
It happened on live TV, right? And January 6th is the actual that day, the events of that day, including the attack on the Capitol, has to be one of the most recorded events in human history, including by many of the rioters who recorded themselves, quite clumsily, going into the building or attacking cops or whatever, So the idea that there's some big mystery to solve here is pretty stupid, right? I mean, you've got all this evidence right in front of you. You can see it with your own eyes. And you have to be, but the bottom line is, right, you have to want to believe that what you saw with your own eyes didn't happen, right? You have to want to believe some other explanation for all this, and that has to do with the human mind and really the flaws in the psychology, and how the human mind works or doesn't work, because you can amass dozens and dozens of facts, and show something is wrong, and you won't get anywhere. I mean, one of the most frustrating things to me, and maybe you've encountered this, I don't know, you could tell me, but is when, my view is,
oh shit,
I know that my brain is not perfect, right? I make mistakes in thinking and I make mistakes in sort of how I assess things, but I try and correct them, right? I try and figure out what's going on and figure out how I got things wrong. What I've encountered when it comes to this type of thing, when it comes to January 6th or related issues, right, is that somebody will state something. You can show them definitively that it's false, like the Dominion machines, somehow switching votes from Trump to Biden, right? And you can show them that there was a hand recount. You can show them, exactly what happened, and they'll either just wave it away or they'll move on to the next lie, right? They'll move on to the next thing, and without ever questioning. Well, wait a minute. I just believe something that's definitively wrong, right? But I'm willing to believe the next thing just because I want to, and that's really, I think, a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, they like what you just said about the hand recount. That doesn't matter anymore. They moved on. They're like, okay, fine, they hand recounted, but they removed the ballots from the envelope, so they can't signature verify anymore, or the signatures might have been fraudulent because they mass mailed out. Like, there's nothing. This is why when people argue, like, I don't think they should send out ballots without a request. If they didn't do that and they only sent out requested ballots, they'd say, oh, well, people are fraudulently requesting ballots. Like, none of this is good faith at the end of the day. And like the proof for this as well is, in my mind, right? I don't want to dive into a whole bunch of other political things, so I don't want to accidentally some things we have hardcore disagreements with, but like a risk one, okay? Fauci might have said a couple things that were dumb or incorrect relating to COVID. It only takes one statement from Fauci to never believe a single thing that he or the entire medical everything says about vaccines for the rest of human history. One thing, okay? But if I can show you 3 plots, okay, from voter fraud that were started in complete, the State Farm stuff is a lie, right? That started as a lie. When you watch the video,
it's also a racist lie, but yes.
Sure. When you watch, so I watched all the State Farm videos. I watched the 6 hours of testimony, right? When I think her name is Deacon Pick or something. She was part of the litigation for Giuliani, and Jenna Ellis's case in Georgia. When she's going through the video, she says, now here, when they go to 9:59, she tells the person operating the video, go ahead 20 minutes, and then they skip ahead 20 minutes. She's like, where did these ballots from under the table come from? And it's like, well, they were, because she knows. And I can show you 3 lies like that. The Dominion voting machine is another thing. That one stupid Pennsylvania thing where 205,000 ballots were received. Yeah, that was
in the report.
Yeah,
That's
it was. Yeah, an hour later, a guy responds on Twitter, and you can click through the website and see. Oh, you see exactly what it is, right? All 3 of those lies were repeated on January 6th, right? Why is it that I can show you all 3 of those intentional lies from start to finish, so repeated, and you still give these people credibility, but one misspeak from Biden or from Fauci, or whatever, and you don't trust it?
Well, that goes to belief. Like you said something about not wanting to get into areas of disagreement or whatever. I'm willing to explore anything, right? I'm willing to examine any evidence and say I was wrong about something, right? But what you're dealing with here with this dynamic when it comes to the conspiracism, again, this doesn't even qualify to conspiracy theory. Right? This is just rabid reflexive conspiracism, paranoia, anti-government paranoia a lot of times. That it doesn't matter how often somebody's disproven in this venue in these beliefs, right? They're just going to continue to believe it anyway,
Yeah.
And that's what's scary about humanity, right? That's what's scary about all this. I mean, because really, if you think about the American political system, we're supposed to have a system where different factions or interests have to compromise at the end.
She turned around and took me by the hand and said I lost control again. And how I'll never know just why or understand. She said I lost control again. And she screamed out, kicking on her side, and said I lost control again. And she's upon the floor, I thought she died. She said I lost control. She's lost control again. She's lost control. She's lost control again. She's lost control. State my case and say she's lost control again. And she showed up all the errors and mistakes and said I've lost control again. And she expressed herself in many different ways until she lost control again. And walked upon the edge of no escape and laughed, I've lost control. She's lost control again. She's lost control. She's lost control again. She's lost control.
I'm sitting here, thinking the warning, waiting for the tick to run. We've been moving around in different situations, knowing that the time would come. just to see you torn apart. Witness to your empty heart. I need it. I need it. I need it. Through the wire screen, the eyes of those standing outside looked in at her, as into the cage of some rare creature in a zoo. In the hand of one of the assistants, she saw the same instrument which they had that morning, inserted deep into her body. She shuddered instinctively. No life at all in the house of dolls. No, 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 lost. No, 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 lost. You've been seeing things as doctors not in learning, hoping that the truth will pass. No life underground, wasting, never changing, wishing that this day won't last. To never see you show your age, to watch you till the beauty fades. I need it, I need it, I need it. I'm slowly drifting to you. Stars and planets are calling me.
To the electorate and intentionally done by the media figures is so frustrating because you ask people about, like, say that the event So I'm like, I don't know, was it really his responsibility? And it was a huge argument we had there where I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That kind of was the inciting moment for me to read.
But go ahead, yeah.
Yeah. So we're arguing, and he's trying to make the claim that, like, we all saw Tucker Carlson, you know, the police let them in. And it was like, oh, okay. You want to bet $5,000 here and now that the first person that broke into the Capitol, got into the Capitol, was let in by police or broke in with a riot shield, okay? Because we know who it is, Dominic Pizzola. We have the video, like you said, is in 4K, 60 FPS, uploaded to YouTube, streamed all over the world, 52 different angles. Like, how can you possibly mind wipe this?
Owen Schroyer, I believe, was convicted of entering the Capitol and crimes related to misdemeanors. Or
Capitol grounds. Yep. Yeah, 2 months in prison, yeah.
And by the way, I mean, you saw he, prior to January 6th, I mean, he and Alex Jones absolutely incited people with the Stop the Steal, Fight for Trump stuff, and, some of the more provocative imagery. You can actually download the DOJ's court filing for Owen Schroyer from the justice.gov and see what was in there. You can links to the videos, links to everything else. I mean, clearly instigating people, inciting people with crazy nonsense.
Yeah, and then afterwards they play so dumb. Like I'm asking him on stage. I'm like, you said that this isn't an insurrection, right? It's like, yeah. It's like, you were saying 1776. What does that mean? And he's like, well, 1776 was the founding of America. I was like, what would you call that event? And he's like, well, it was the revolution. Would you consider it an insurrection? He's like, no, I wouldn't. I'm like, wait, what?
Well, 1776 is at a minimum violent, right? I mean,
what do you mean? Yeah, Jesus, yeah, the American Revolution.
I'm descended from a young man who fought for the rebels, in the American Revolution. So I take American history very seriously, and I take pride in American history very seriously. And what these guys are selling is really a disfigured patriotism, right? It's really a really disgusting disfigurement of what patriotic belief should be and what it can be, and that's what bothers me. I mean, really, what they're doing is they were advocating on behalf of the modern King George, not on behalf of democracy or individual liberty or freedom or democracy or anything like that. They were working for the modern King George, somebody who wanted to overturn that for his own political ambitions and desires,
Yeah.
But by the way, I mean, something like that InfoWars host you're talking about, Owen Schroyer there, I mean, if really it was about cops let everybody in the building, well, then why didn't you use that as an excuse in your defense to get off from these misdemeanor charges? If it's so easy to show, then you should be able to show that or go back and relitigate it,
Yeah.
But I mean, of course, it isn't. I mean, there's plenty of evidence showing what actually happened.
Yeah. But then there's we call it the all roads lead to Rome fallacy, where every single thing becomes a reinforcement of the conspiracy, right? If nobody was arrested, it's because nothing happened and we knew it was bullshit. If people get arrested, well, it's because we know that it's bullshit. They're not even going to be convicted. If they get convicted, oh my God, yeah, Ray Epps didn't say anything near as much as you guys did, right? You guys are accusing Ray Epps as one statement that he made the night before about we're going to go into the Capitol, and when he made it, Baked Alaska, all these people have debate. I know. They said that he was a Fed, but they still did it the next day anyway. What the? What are you doing? Yeah, what the?
I pointed that out I did a 60 Minutes episode on that. I think it was it earlier this year or last year? I don't even remember anymore. But I did 60 Minutes on that because they asked me why Ray Epps wasn't in the report, and I said because he wasn't important enough to put in the report. If you actually read Ray Epps' transcript or watch the interviews with him or anything, this guy is not really capable of masterminding anything, let alone January 6th. But here's the thing about it, right? This is where there's this cognitive dissonance and this real sickness is pervasive now. You go back to the footage on January 6th and you watch the footage of Ray Epps that these people like to point to on January 6th itself. You know what is right around Ray Epps a lot of times that they don't want you to talk about or they don't point out when these conspiracists do this, right? The Proud Boys.
Oh,
and
sure.
The Proud Boys are instigating the crowd.
Yeah. They
are instigating the violence. They are instigating the breaches of the outer perimeter of the security of the Capitol, the Peace Circle, and then of the Capitol building itself, right? We just mentioned Dominic Pizzola. That's a 2:13 p.m. Senate wing window, right?
Yep.
We know that. Everybody saw that. But before that, at 12:53 p.m. on that day, Joe Biggs and the Proud Boys, who've been convicted of seditious conspiracy, by the way, and all this has been, litigated in a court of law, they march a whole group of people to the Peace Circle, the security there. They instigate the crowd. Ray Epps is there because he's a believer. He believes in Trump's lies. He believes in so. And by the way, I never defend Ray Epps, right? I wish he had been arrested and charged earlier. Fine by me. I don't defend Ray Epps one bit. But the idea that he's somehow the mastermind, while we have this mountain of evidence showing who the actual masterminds are, the actual instigators are, over and over and over again, shows you how biased these people are and how they're not reasonable.
Yeah.
And so you have way more patience than I do, because I could never debate these people. I would not be able. I just would scoff at them.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I guess so. A question. So I guess a few questions. I guess so. Here's the first one. So obviously, you guys. Well, am I allowed to ask? How do you even get tasked with? What was like the path you took to being the person?
You can ask me anything. I don't care. I'm an open book. So,
Okay. Well, what's the craziest thing you learned that had a top secret security clearance? No, I'm just kidding. Wait, so,
I never had top secret security clearance. So.
Oh, okay. So you can't tell us what was in Hillary's emails or anything. That's fine. Yeah.
I think
what is the
out there now?
Yeah. What is the path that you took to get to be involved with this? I guess. Yeah.
I'm basically a nerd. I'm known as a nerd. I'm somebody who likes to accumulate facts and evidence and write about them and figure out and explain, what happened, and I'm kind of known. I was known in the counter-extremism, counterterrorism community for doing that, foreign policy world. Like I said, I was previously an economist. I did that. And I knew Liz Cheney for a long time. I've known her for over 20 years. And she introduced me to others on the committee, Democrats on the committee. And I interviewed with folks, and eventually they, hired me to come on and help put together a report. Because basically it's the type of lengthy thing, the type of long, fact-laden, research-dense, project that I kind of specialize in. So, they basically, wanted a nerd to do that kind of stuff. So
can you say prior to this, any other like big projects you've been involved in that you're particularly proud of? Or
a lot. I've got a peer-reviewed book for Columbia University Press that came out in 2022 while I was on the committee on it's really a reevaluation of the history of jihadism and foreign terrorism, mainly looking at Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban. I did a lot of work on that. Like I said, I testified more than 20 times before Congress. You can look up my testimony before Congress on numerous occasions on this stuff. I was always the guy that would just sort of no bullshit, right? Like, here's what's wrong, and I'm gonna go at it. So that's kind of my reputation on this stuff. Before that, though, I worked as an economist. I actually wrote. Co-authored the seminal study of thoroughbred horse racing and the economics of that.
Okay.
So if you got into my whole career, you'd be kind of it's interesting. I've gotten to look at all sorts of different industries, topics, and everything else. But basically, I'm a guy who's known to scoop up as much evidence as possible, as many facts as possible, and put it into a story, synthesize it in a way that people can digest it. That's sort of what I do.
Okay. Yeah. When you started writing this J6 report, what's the beginning of this? So originally I wanted to put together a 20-minute video. That was my goal, to explain some big things. And then I realized, okay, well, it's probably not going to be 20 minutes, probably not 30 minutes. And now I have like a 20,000 word script. I'm trying to do it like in under an hour and a half. But the hard part is the editorializing, right? Because you have to cut so much, because it's hard to explain everything. When you guys are deciding what to put in the report, what to keep from the report, like you mentioned, like Ray Epps, and I'm sure there's probably a million other things that you could have added.
Exactly.
And the report is lengthy. It took, 6 days in Congress to get through it. It's like an 830 plus page report. Yeah, what was the decision making like for what to keep and what to get rid of?
I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, you could write versions of, like, so there are, there's the introduction or the sort of executive summary, which is like 150 pages itself.
Yeah.
I didn't really spend much time on that. That's one part of the report I didn't spend much time on at all. But chapters 1 through 8, which are the core of the text, I spent a lot of time on that. There's a lot of me in those chapters. Some of them I wrote a lot of it. Basically, it's an over 800-page report, 845 pages or whatever it is, right? I don't even know, depending on how you count it. It easily could be 8,000 pages, to be honest with you. And so the point was, even you take chapter 8, which is the analysis of the attack, or any one of the other components of it, a lot of the other pieces of this could be a lot longer, a lot longer. But the thing is that I learned in writing for the public a long time ago, the longer you make something, the more readers you lose, and you lose the main point, right?
Yeah.
Like you start losing people a certain number of words in, I learned, writing articles, some of the best articles I thought, one of the other things I've done is I've been a prolific sort of magazine writer and website writer. And I helped found a website called Long War Journal, which was really the #1 counterterrorism online publication, I would say, for a long time. One of the things I learned was that the articles I was most proud of and I thought were the smartest were duds. They went nowhere. Yeah. And the stuff that I thought was kind of the simplest, sort of most obvious, but shorter, went viral or got caught on a lot. So I had that in mind when putting together the report, for sure, and working with others to put together the report.
What so there are certain narratives that you can kind of like pick out in terms of like these are important stories to tell. So stuff relating to Pence is an important story to tell. The whole inside the DOJ stuff with Clark is an important story to tell. Were there any stories that you wanted to tell that almost made the cut, but you were like, this is too much, or it's already too long, or whatever? Do you think there are, like, if there was one other thing you could have included, I guess, what would you have included?
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm a nerd. I think there's been a lot of, I didn't really get a chance to do it. I mean, I would have liked to have done it, but we could have done more on the actual attack and what was the amount of evidence and the role by online sleuths who have uncovered all sorts of personalities and people who, committed crimes that day, and put together a more robust. The committee kind of put out this sort of shell of this thing I had envisioned, which was a model of the attack. It was supposed to be this interactive thing, and it kind of was a dud. It really wasn't what I had in mind or would hope we would produce. Could have done a lot more with that, with all the video and all the other content that's out there, sort of building out a chronology that had all this video and had all this content that was publicly available, and then sort of filtering it through this interactive model of the Capitol for people to click on and understand things.
Yeah.
But the core structure of the report is basically how the hearings were laid out, right? I mean, the committee decided this was the way they were going to structure the plot, right? The spoken wheel that I talked about earlier, the spoken wheel plot of the whole thing here. You have the big lie, you have pressure on state officials, fake elector scheme, DOJ, Vice President Pence, 187 minutes, the attack, all that stuff, fits into the wheel of the conspiracy. So each chapter in the core of the report deals with one of those spokes, basically, but recognizing that they all, at the end of the day, form the same wheel.
Yeah. Here's a question. I'm assuming that the full deposition tapes exist. Is there any plan, or will those ever all be released, or?
I have no idea. Like, I don't know what exists or doesn't exist. Actually, I wouldn't assume anything. I mean, I think, I don't know if there was, size constraints for some of this, with the video and everything. I have no idea. So
Okay.
I wasn't involved in producing materials to the public, so I have no idea what actually occurred.
Gotcha. I guess I'm just assuming that because I read through a lot of the depositions, and then in the J6 committee, a lot of those people show up and they're speaking, and I just assumed that was the spoken part of the actual recorded deposition. But maybe it was or they brought him back and they asked him the same questions, maybe. But
no, I think those are probably clips of the original.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the full videos are not available for one reason or another. I don't know what happened and all that stuff.
Yeah. One of the, I don't know if you share this frustration. One of the big frustrations in getting through a lot of this is you brought up the Electoral College, but something I even realized is a lot of the story doesn't really open up until you kind of have, this sounds so pathetic, but until you understand about like how the government works.
Right.
Like, what is an attorney general? Like, what does it mean when somebody's acting? But once you understand that, and this is why I wanted to make a video about this so badly, once you understand everything, not only does all of the stuff look insane, you also end up with, like, I thought a lot of the characters involved were really cool. The only reason I'm asking about the deposition is because I want to see the full video of Hirschman's deposition. Like, that guy seems...
Hirschman. Yeah, Eric Hirschman is the one. Yeah, I mean,
he's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, no, he's entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah, and Rosen and Donahue and Engel, like all three of these guys are also they're funny, and they're personable.
They're funny, but you know what? But you talk about Rosen, Engel, and Donahue. But here's the thing about DOJ. And you talk about DOJ, right? This is why this is so important.
Yeah.
The Department of Justice has no constitutional role to play whatsoever in the Electoral College process.
Yeah.
Okay. It's only if there is some crime that's been committed, like a specific instance of fraud or something like that, that needs to be investigated and prosecuted, the DOJ has a role to play. And Attorney General Barr opened up the books on this very early to allow early investigations to any allegations of wrongdoing, right? And by the way, there were a lot of people on the left that criticized him for doing that. I have my own criticisms of Barr, but in this instance, I don't think there was anything wrong in doing that. I think he was trying to basically get ahead of whatever needed to be investigated, okay? But the bottom line is they didn't find anything, right? There was nothing real. It was like the myths you talked about earlier with Dominion voting machines, the 205,000 voters in Pennsylvania, these types of the State Farm. They investigated. They looked into this stuff. It's all in the chapter on the DOJ, right? That's in there, which is chapter 4, I think, of the report. But it's all nonsense. It's all bullshit, right? As Barr said it's all bullshit because it is all bullshit.
Yeah.
And Trump knows this. They say it's all bullshit, but here's the point, right? Under our system, the states play have a constitutional role to play in how you certify electors, how the vote is conducted and counted, right? And then how electors are certified and a victor is declared, right? The executive branch in our system has zero role to play in that. And it's certainly the Department of Justice has zero role to play in that. What Trump was trying to do was abuse the power of the Department of Justice to interfere in the constitutional processes of other branches of government, other parts of the U.S. government.
Yeah, so
this is a huge point, right? Because a lot of the people you're talking about who are supposedly constitutional conservatives who are mired in myths about January 6th and lies about it, right? Well, listen, buddy, you can't be a constitutional conservative if you're in favor of this, or you're going to make excuses for this, because this is the opposite of constitutional conservatism. This is trying to shred the Constitution, you know?
Yeah, this goes back to what I just said about like understanding the civics. Is that when I heard that Raffensperger call initially, I'm thinking like, man, the fact that he was like looking for votes and he was like doing all this kind of weird, you know, repeating these conspiracies, and that was kind of, you know, that was a bad thing. And then after, because when I started getting steeped in the J6 stuff, now I'm starting to read like, what is the structure of the DOJ? How does, you know, how are offices and departments created for the executive? I don't know. I had no idea, right? So I'm just reading the Constitution, reading where these things come from, and it's like, okay, now when I look back at the at like the Raffensperger call, I don't even care that much about the 11,000 vote thing. Why is a guy running for office calling the Secretary of State to accuse them of voter stuff and asking for voter roll? Like, it's on its face, the phone call, even if he wasn't president, is completely inappropriate. The fact that he is president makes it even more inappropriate. Just that call is insane just because it exists. And then also I don't know if this was in your guys' report or not. I think it was. Donald Trump even called one of the lower investigators.
Yeah, it's in there. Yep.
Yeah, it's an insane call. I'm so happy that, I don't know if it was Brad or Ryan who recorded the call that leaked when Donald Trump the next day said, oh, they don't know anything about it. And then he leaked the whole thing. So glad that call was leaked. But my God,
But what you just mentioned there, though, that's part of why this is so serious. Remember at the outset, we talked about January 6th being the culmination of this, going from, you know, really before the election, but certainly from election day onward, right? Trump and his associates do this across the board, across all the swing states. They call executive branch officials that have a constitutional role in certifying the results of an election, right?
Yeah.
They call lower level, you know, executives, right? You know, state and local government officials, trying to get anybody they can to obstruct Donald Trump's defeat, right? And this is again, this is an attack on the constitutional order of the first order, you know, magnitude. And this is why I say, when I started putting together the report, working with others on it, right? One of the things I said was, before you even get to the violence, before you even get there, we have a very serious attack on our constitutional order. You know, before you even get to the organized riot, as I call it, on January 6th, before you even get there, this is very serious. Because for the first time in our history, we have a president trying to misuse and abuse the power of including the bully pulpit of the presidency, to interfere with all these other constitutional duties that officials around the country have to perform.
Yeah, and then the collective amnesia, accidentally or induced to the electorate and intentionally done by the media figures, is so frustrating. Because you ask people about, like, say that the event itself, January 6th, and you're like, you know, well, like I'll talk to people, and there's that one stupid quote from Trump. I know you'll be marching peacefully, and they always say that, like, well, he told them to march peacefully. This came at like 20 minutes in the speech. It was an hour speech of unhinged so many unhinged things. But I'm like, okay, he tweeted out that it was going to be a historic event, right? And they're like, well, yeah, I guess, okay. And it was on January 6th, right? Yeah, okay. What were they protesting? Well, they just were upset. It's like, okay, he sent them all down, he riled them all up. Then there was, you know, a riot. Was that like an accident? And they're like, well, yeah, it was just a coincidence. Yeah, I don't think he didn't want it. So it was just a coincidence that they all showed up on the day of the certification. They marched down. They fought like hell. They thought the election was stolen. They delayed the certification. That was all a coincidence. And the collective amnesia over all of it. Or I'll ask people questions. Like one that I like a lot is when Donald Trump said over and over again that Mike Pence needs to do the right thing. What the fuck was he talking about? What did he mean by that? Do the right thing. What was the right thing? And people are like, well, I don't know. I have no idea. It's like, yeah.
All right. Well, couple things on this. Let's take this one thing at a time. So, peacefully and patriotically, I wrote a piece at Just Security on this. You can Google it, right? Taking apart this defense. So one of the things that the investigative team on the committee found, January 6th committee found, was drafts of Trump's speech and how it was crafted for January 6th. And it's true, he does say at one point, very briefly, peacefully and patriotically, right? But that's the only time he says the word peacefully, right? The words don't come from him. They come from his speechwriters, right? And he invokes the word fight at least 20 other occasions in the speech. And the etymology of the speech shows that is him. That is his words. That is what he's doing, including what is, I think, inarguably the most incendiary line ever spoken by a sitting U.S. president in our domestic politics, which is, you got to fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, we're not going to have a country anymore. Right. So you're going to tell me that people, you know, the peacefully line somehow trumps the 20 times that he used the word fight in one context or another, including that incendiary line, which is the most incendiary line you can imagine. And by the way, the stuff focused on Pence, sending them down to the Capitol, as Barr himself has said, right, was all about intimidating Pence. It was about intimidating his own vice president. That's why he's doing it. There's no reason to march to the Capitol, who, at that point, there's only one card left to play. That's the Pence card, as they called it, right, which is to pressure Pence to help him overturn the election results. That the whole point of sending the mob down there is to intimidate Pence in Congress and to try and obstruct, at a minimum, obstruct certification. Again, whether he knows there's going to be any violence or not, or whether he's, directly involved in or blessing any violence or not, the point is he wants this mob to go down to the Capitol to obstruct the certification of the proceeding. They want him to intimidate his own vice president into not doing his constitutional duty on January 6th, which is, and by the way, anybody who tells you they don't know if what Pence should have done on January 6th, there's only two sources for the vice president's power. They're both discussed in the report, right? One is the 12th Amendment. There's a single line. Doesn't say anything about any of the stuff that Trump was trying to have the vice president do. And the other one was the Electoral Count Act of 1887 at the time, in which case Trump and his advisors were trying to get Pence to violate it.
Yeah.
Knowingly. So there's no constitutional or historical or legal precedent or basis for anything they were trying to get Pence to do. And the mob gets sent down to the Capitol purely to try and get him to do something other than his constitutional duty.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing too. Like, what were they protesting there? And like, people won't answer that question. What were they on January 6th during the certification of the vote? Right. I thought, because again, they want to live in every world. I thought that the extra slates were just there in case there was voter fraud discovered. Right. Well, there was none. They didn't win that. Right. And they're like, we just need 10 more days. We just want 10 more days to investigate. Really? Yeah. 10 more days is gonna. Yeah. It's very frustrating.
By the way, 10 more days would have violated the Electoral Count Act at the time, which had governed that proceeding for 130 years. So again, every iteration of what they claimed they wanted, right? Every single one of them would violate either the Constitution or statutory law or a combination thereof.
Yeah.
So they had no legal basis for any of it,
Which is also, it's really frustrating too, that you have to dive a bit into like I don't even want to say it's legalese, because it's not super complicated, but it's hard to understand. I have to explain to people, when they say constitutional, that's code for breaking the law. That's what they mean when they say that. Anytime they mention the 12th Amendment, what they're really saying is we have to break the ECA, the law, because of the interpretation that we have of the Constitution that, as was said by, is it Anthony Short? Or Gregory Short? That Short and... Mark Short, yeah, Mark Short.
Greg Jacobs.
It's Greg Jacobs and Mark Short, yeah. I think it might have been said by both of them. Yeah, that multiple times Eastman admitted they would lose 2-7, they'd lose 0-9, or that, like, I don't think the court would hear it. It's a major political question thing. They wouldn't hear it, right? They knew that this was never going to work. So, but you have to tell people that, like, no, constitutional doesn't mean that, like, they were following law. Constitutional means they wanted to break the law. That's what they were saying.
It's Orwellian. It's actually the opposite of constitutional. They want to break the Constitution. They want to subsume. They want the vice president to assume unconstitutional powers. I mean, there's a single line in the 12th Amendment. It's in the report. You can look it up online, right? You have to be completely delusional to think that single line in the 12th Amendment justifies anything they were trying to get Pence to do, because it doesn't. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything about any of that. So, it's frightening though that they were able to invent this whole cockamamie scheme based on one line of text in the Constitution, which, by the way, Eastman and others had admitted previously did not justify.
I saw a really good breakdown. Oh, because you guys included that as well. The email where Eastman breaks down is like, obviously the vice president doesn't have the power to do this. It would probably fail on these levels, and he knew that before going in.
And then but again, it goes back to the problems here, right? Of wanting to believe something, regardless of what the evidence is. Even somebody like this, who's supposedly a constitutional lawyer, can completely invert what he himself knows about all this to justify his beliefs.
Yeah. So here's a question that I have to speak to states of mind. Some people involved, I would argue, are traitors. But these people all have impressive backgrounds. Rudy Giuliani, the RICO guy, New York prosecutor, right? Sidney Powell.
I was the chief counterterrorism advisor for the 2008 presidential campaign.
Do what?
I was the chief counterterrorism advisor for Rudy Giuliani for the 2008 presidential campaign.
Okay, yeah. I mean, America's...
So I saw him go from supposedly America's mayor to this drooling imbecile, repeating all sorts of nonsense on behalf of Trump. Yeah, I mean, it's an unbelievable fall from grace.
Sidney Powell, one of the youngest women, I think, federal prosecutors in U.S. history. Eastman was a constitutional lawyer, professor at Chapman. These people have these backgrounds, and all the people that got drafted into Trump's team were just insane. But then on the flip side, and this is something that I'm trying to stress so much to people that I talk to, the J6 plot, all of that, it wasn't stopped by progressives. It wasn't stopped by Biden or Kamala or Obama or the left or the Clintons or whatever. It was a whole bunch of people that Barr is supposed to be the #1 executive power and Trump sycophant. And he stood up to it. And Pence heroically stood up to it. And, Hirschman and all of these White House staff and lawyers and everything, like all these guys stood up to it. Why do you think that like people like Barr didn't just go along with it? Like, what do you think was the major stopping point for a lot of these guys?
I'm not a mind reader. I don't know. I mean, Barr was certainly, very willing to do Trump's bidding up until then. Which is what makes him unwilling to do it even more interesting and telling and credible. I mean, I have other criticisms of Barr. There are plenty of other ways you can criticize Barr, but he clearly stood up in that moment to what the nonsense Trump was trying to do. And he says, he even says on the record with the committee, he says, I don't think that any administration should try and stay in power based on lies about the election. So he knows he knows that even though he's backpedaled and he says he's going to vote for Trump and all this other stuff, he knows how dangerous this all is, right? I mean, he has to. He lived it. I mean, he resigned in
like
large
2 weeks before the election.
December 14th. Yeah, he issues his letter on just and in December 14th was 2020. So the bottom line is but there's an important point here too to zoom out of all this. So the backbone of the narrative. I mean, there are some Democrats involved. There are some local election workers involved who are not Republicans, like Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss in Georgia, who are smeared with these racist smears. In State Farm Arena. There's people like that, obviously, who are their lives are upended by Trump and his bullying, right? But the backbone of this are Republican officials from the federal government all the way down to the local governments who say no. They stand up to Trump in his attempt to overturn the election, right? But here's the thing: what does Trump do? He systematically attacks, using the bully pulpit of the presidency, each and every one of them, including his own vice president, right? Folks, that's the definition of autocracy. He's putting the auto in autocracy, right? Because it is, at the end of the day, only about one, right? His own vice president throws him under the bus. His own attorney general throws him under the bus. You can go through all these different other Republicans all the way down. People who worked to try and get him elected and reelected, people who were on his side through Election Day 2020, people who tried to get him elected and wanted him to stay in office and just play an election. He throws them all under the bus and attacks them. He uses the bully pulpit to turn his mob against them, and that's really dangerous. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, he does. It's a thing that there are a million things to point out, but it's something that you notice as a trend through all of his speeches up through even January 6th, is when people play ball with him, he calls them out and he says, like, this guy is such a great congressman. We support, there are the 11 senators and then I think Jim Jordan or whatever, the worst person in the history of the House. These people that he's always giving credit to, he's always calling out. And when people don't play ball, he's always saying this, I think for Brian Kemp, he called him a schmuck on the phone. These guys that we get elected and they're not loyal to us and they don't help. And it's like, Jesus, like, how is it not so transparent what's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, the evidence part of the big part of the January 6th case, including the federal case brought by special counsel, you can see that there's this whole pattern of behavior. Again, reposting information that really paints targets on these officials' backs all the way across all the swing states, and then of course leading up to Vice President Pence himself repeatedly. I mean, that's also another rebuttal to Trump's behavior during the attack, or immediately preceding the attack and then during the attack. The first actual tweet that he puts out is at 2:24, where he attacks Vice President Pence right in the middle of the attack. Doesn't have the courage to do what was necessary, right? The stuff that comes after that, he does say stuff about, stay peaceful, that kind of thing after that, right? But it's not him, right? It's his advisors and his daughter and everybody else putting words in his mouth and trying him. Now, he does tweet out some of the stuff, but the point is, like, the first blush at it, the first attack at it from him, the first instance of him in his own words is always the most aggressive, the most, zealous, the most, trying to rile people up.
And I think I have to go back and check the times, but I think isn't that stay peaceful tweet that might come like minutes after I think Ashley Babbitt was already shot.
I'd have to look on the timing on that, but I mean, basically, people are trying desperately to, and by the way, he keeps holding Ashley Babbitt up as a martyr for the cause, and it is tragic that she was shot and killed on January 6th. It's awful, right? But she was shot climbing through a window, just feet away from members of Congress and others, right? When trying to lead, at the forefront of this mob that's trying to go through. It's awful that she was shot and killed. It's tragic. It's also tragic that she believed all this QAnon nonsense that Trump endorsed. You know, Trump as president is given multiple opportunities to knock down the QAnon conspiracy theory, right? And he doesn't. You know, he does the opposite. He actually validates the core beliefs of QAnon. You know, he's asked at one point right from the podium. You know, he says they say, what do you think about these people who think you're trying to head off this satanic cult of pedophiles of Democrats and others like that. And he says, well, would it be such a bad thing if that's what I was doing? You know, I mean, it's like, this is crazy stuff, you know, but here's the thing, right, that I want to get across to anybody who's watching this, right? Think about how dangerous it is for a president of the United States to validate the craziest shit you see online, right? Because that's what this guy does. And he does it over and over again, you know? And now this isn't just some guy out there that Savannah Guthrie said during an interview with him. This isn't your uncle, right? This isn't your crazy uncle doing this. This is the president of the United States saying this nonsense that's percolating online that's dangerous. That stuff's legitimate, you know? And so that's a big part of the problem, I would say.
Yeah, listening to Short talk about how I think he was getting emails, or actually, wait, it might have been Rosen too, getting emails about like, I need you to like look into this. And it's like the Italian guy talking about the satellites flipping votes. And it's like, Jesus Christ.
It's dumb, right? I mean, it's really dumb stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really stupid. You know, man, that's the other thing people aren't supposed to say, but I'll say it, you know. This is really stupid stuff.
It is stupid,
right?
yes.
Stupid. It's stupid, right? People won't say that, but you have to say that, right? Because it is dumb, right? This is an insult to the intelligence of anybody who has any kind of intellect, you know? This is really, really dumb stuff, you know? So
yeah, even like all the Ruby Freeman and Shamos stuff, like they did all of this rigging, all this conspiratorial stuff. Why the fuck did they give you the tapes then? Because another thing that I wish people would realize sometimes is when they allege stuff, it happens a lot with conspiracies, right? Sometimes people will allege what would be the largest conspiracy in the history of the country, right? The idea that somebody is with top-down coordination rigging elections across several, that would probably be one of the largest conspiracies and most impactful, maybe in all of world history, in all of human history, and the evidence is non-existent, right? You're alleging something so grand, right? If this was the case, right? If the Clintons are killing people like Seth Rich and protecting Jeffrey Epstein and all this, why are they giving you the tapes? Why would the State Farm Arena tapes be visible? You don't think they would take care of the security cameras in the corner of the room, right?
Right.
Or people,
but there's an old logical principle that's very well known, that's been known for thousands of years, that you're extrapolating on there, which is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, right?
Oh, I've changed that now. I just say extraordinary claims require at least any evidence at all. Give me one thing.
I was going to follow up with saying these extraordinary claims require just a scintilla of evidence.
Yeah.
Anything whatsoever. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's the point, right? They're building these monumental sandcastles on not even a grain of sand, you know, and that's a real big problem, you know, because that's why it doesn't even qualify as conspiracy theories, right? This is just rabid conspiracism, you know.
Yeah, because they can just lie with impunity over anything and just keep repeating it over and over, and people just like believe it, even though, like I said, a lot of these were debunked like the day of. Like the Dominion stuff was. That's another thing I'll do now when I'm on stage. It's like, oh, you think Dominion was rigged? Go ahead and say that, right? Because the content creators know that they got sued, and they know that they won't say it. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, or Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss won 148 million, I think, from Giuliani, and that was another thing Owen Schreier said. He's like, yeah, the ballots were ran 3 times in Georgia. I was like, oh, who ran those? Will you say who ran? He's like, well, it wasn't Ruby or Shay, it was somebody else. Like, oh, okay, we're changing the names now.
I mean, yeah, again, I don't even know if patience is the right word, because I could, like somebody like that, I don't think I could, you know, debate in good faith. I mean, I think that type of stuff is just so dishonest.
Yeah,
and so.
But half the electorate, like. My guess would be over 80% of Republicans probably believe the State Farm video. I'm sure there are liberals that even think the State Farm video maybe is real or hard to explain.
I mean, all the data, you know, shows that Republicans are much more willing to believe this stuff than liberals or Democrats for sure at this point. And again, I think that's because Trump, who was president of the United States, and his minions said it was legit, said it was true, right? I mean, this is the power of the presidency. You know, it's not coming from your crazy uncle. It's coming from a guy who was president of the United States is telling you that all this stuff is going on. You know, that's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah,
it's so dangerous. That's why it's so dangerous. If 2 weeks from today, or shortly thereafter, he wins the election, in my view, because then this broken reality that he and his followers live in gets enshrined as truth. You know.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things when people say, like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen if Trump is elected? And to some extent, it's like a referendum on what conduct you're allowed to get away with. Like, why would you ever waste your time being truthful or about anything, right, if this is the reward for it? So you said that you were involved in the drafting of the report, but none of the live, like, presentation in Congress, right?
No, I didn't say that. No.
Oh, okay. Was there...
I wasn't involved in... You were asking about, like, where
The
the
deposition,
video, I don't know where any of that stuff. I didn't have any role in producing stuff online as the committee was like shutting down. I didn't have any role in any of that. But in terms of the hearings, I absolutely had a role in the hearings. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Were you happy with how the like the video, the presentation turned out compared to like the written report?
Yeah, I mean, I'm proud of the work the committee did. There's obviously a lot of people involved. I mean, obviously, I'm just one person, so there's a lot of people involved. But yeah, I'm very happy with it. I mean, there's definitely things that always could be better or go better. I mean, I'm a nerd, so I go back and read my own stuff and kind of think it could be better, at times. So, yeah, no, I mean, I think the hearings conveyed what they needed to convey. It's a very Again, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of evidence, and trying to boil that down and synthesize it and get people to pay attention, understand. But to me, I looked at it as if you're a constitutional conservative out there, how can you possibly think that any of this is kosher, right? How can you possibly think that anything you're seeing here is legitimate? Because none of it is.
Yeah.
So
what do you think caused, or why do you think it was so hard for Americans to be persuaded by this? Or have you ever in your personal life seen a conservative and argued any of these points and moved them on anything? Like, what is like the most convincing or compelling thing when you're talking to people for this stuff that don't agree with it coming in? Or is there any answer to
I don't have a good answer. I mean, you mentioned your family members earlier. I have family members too. I won't identify, but I have family members, friends, longtime colleagues who, people who believe all sorts of bullshit, and they're not stupid people, and yet they believe stuff that's really dumb, and it's very hard to accept that and figure out a way around it. I mean, you could sit down and show them something, and what I would say is, even if they concede that point, they'll just move on to the next lie, the next thing to justify the original belief, right? And it just shows how fragile the human mind really is, and that the human mind is really, if a person wants to believe something, he or she will believe it, And this is also what's so dangerous about bad leadership, though, right? Because humans do need decent leaders, people who are willing to guide them and put their passions into something that's productive and is a better outcome for all of us, right? And when you have somebody who abuses their authority and their power to lead them down these dark paths and these dark roads, this is the outcome, right? And that's why you have people who believe stuff like they do today about the 2020 election,
What do you think for the current information environment that we exist in? Do you have any ideas personally about like what you would like to see changed, or any kind of like path forward? Because it seems like it's unsustainable right now, or at least not with America as being a country for much longer.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not going to claim to have the answers. I mean, a mutual friend of mine opened me up to what you're doing, and to what some other people are doing in terms of these debates or anything. I think that's great. You have more patience than I do in terms of the people you debate, because I definitely would have a hard time not insulting them, from how stupid the stuff is you hear and you see, I don't know what the path forward is. I mean, I do think there's, an educational component. I do think people have to kind of be better educated and understand these things. I think that there needs to be a better sort of consensus building for people who are opposed to this type of stuff. Better coalition building. People need to say, okay, we can disagree on X, Y, and Z, but this is sort of a core thing here, right? This is the core of our democracy and how it's going to function, and we need to expand that coalition as broad as possible to hold the line against people who really are so rabid in their beliefs that they would undermine it.
I think that's one of the scariest things to me is it feels like there are core American things right now that we're not all aligning on in like very troubling ways. Like, again, I don't know your positions on it, but I would argue that a lot of our involvement in the Middle East, especially when it came to Iraq, I'm sure you could justify some initial invasions or attacks like in Afghanistan, or you getting Osama bin Laden, but after 9/11, at the very least, it was hold on, okay, let's stop fighting for a second. Whoever the fuck George Bush tells us to go after, we will attack any country on the planet. We are united as fuck. We just got hit. This is bullshit, right? I genuinely feel like today, and maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like today, if we were attacked by somebody, I don't even know if the United States would be united in its response.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I've thought that many times.
Yep. What in your interpretation of things, what do you think is the thing that's changed the most, I guess, over the past 20 or 30 years?
Social media in the online world, because now what happens is that hurting is a human thing. It's a human phenomenon, just like it is for other animals, but it often happens either It can happen with a mob, like you saw on January 6th, or it can happen in terms of herding of opinion, And, I was, so I was originally an economist, and our sister company, much of our sister company was wiped out on 9/11. And so my mind started to turn from these economic projects that I was working on, research projects, to counterterrorism. That's how I originally got involved. And like I said, eventually I ended up being, counterterrorism advisor to Mayor Giuliani for his 2008 campaign, and, running in those types of circles and advising people on this, and built a career in the counterterrorism world, And, you think about like the 9/11 conspiracy theories, 9/11 trutherism, I remember back then, I'm 48 years old. I remember, as a young man back in 2001 and the years after that, 9/11 trutherism was very much marginalized, that people, it didn't really spread in a way that was sort of dangerous for our political body. It didn't really captivate as many people as it could. And I look at the trajectory of somebody like Alex Jones, who made, one of the big bumps in his career was 9/11 trutherism, right? He did get a bump on that online, but he was still marginalized and was still kept to sort of his corner, right? And now today, you flash forward, and Alex Jones is being celebrated across the MAGA right as some sort of brave truth teller, That, to me, that transformation from somebody and a belief system that should have been marginalized and should remain marginalized to something that could, and by the way, that's entirely tied into January 6th and riling up the crowd before January 6th, on January 6th, and all the lies involved there. That, to me, is really disheartening and is really dangerous. And I don't know totally how to combat it. I don't know how to I don't know that it can be put back in its box entirely. I know that if Trump is reelected, I think then the freaks are going to fly their flags forevermore. That type of stuff is going to basically be endorsed evermore. And you said, you don't know what the incentive is to be honest or truthful or to do it the right way. That, to me, as a nerd, is really that hurts, right? Because that's I've thought that many times. Like, why am I bothering to spend all this time trying to get the quote precisely correct or do this or that when you can have this type of idiotic nonsense gain traction?
Yeah. I had a guy that I was debating who was I think he worked on, I don't think it was InfoWars. I think it was part of Tim Pool's crowd or whatever. And he was denying, there is no evidence that the Proud Boys were even involved, and there's no evidence, and if they were involved, they did much. Like, okay, let's read through the entire Enrique Tarrio indictment. Let's just read through the indictment, and you tell me if this seems bad or not, right? And we're going through. We're like a third of the way through. And it's like, okay, they're just talking. It's not that big of a deal. It's like, okay, well, they want to go to the event. That's fine. And then by the time we hit the end, he's like. I'm not joking when I say this, okay? This isn't a joke. This is a real story. This YouTube video is on my channel. He's like, I fooled you. And I was like, what do you mean you fooled me? And he's like, Enrique Tarrio is a federal informant, and this whole thing is fake. And I'm like, well, fuck me, I guess. Okay, so we just wasted an hour reading this because you realize it's indefensible, and now it's he was a Fed the entire time. Holy Christ. Yeah, and it's like, Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, that's why he was convicted of seditious conspiracy and other felonies and sentenced to 22 years in prison, right? So if he was just a federal informant, you don't think he would have gotten off with, what he did and what he was saying.
Because that's why Ray Epps got off, remember? Ray Epps wasn't charged initially because he was a federal informant, but then he was
charged
to cover it up. And and it's like...
Yeah, it's all, this is the bottom line for me. I know I keep saying this, I keep repeating it, but I can't help it, right? Because I feel like I'm in this venue, I can kind of be a little more unleashed, right? This is all stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Really, really dumb, And this is what happens when you have a herd of stupid people believe something and you can't convince them otherwise, right? So I don't know how you combat that, Again, Rudy Giuliani, who I worked for briefly on this campaign, he went from being America's mayor. And so the point was, even you take Chapter 8, which is the analysis of the attack, or any one of the other components of it, a lot of the other pieces of this could be a lot longer, a lot longer. But the thing is that I learned in writing for the public a long time ago.
So I guess a few questions, So here's the first one. So
the books on this very early to allow early investigations to any allegations of wrongdoing, right? And by the way, there were a lot of people on the left that criticized him for doing that. I have my own criticisms of Barr, but in this instance, I don't think there was anything wrong in doing that. I think he was trying to basically get ahead of whatever needed to be investigated, okay? But the bottom line is they didn't find anything, right? There was nothing real. It was like the myths you talked about earlier with Dominion voting machines, the 205,000 voters in Pennsylvania, these types of the State Farm. They investigated. They looked into this stuff. It's all in the chapter on the DOJ, right? That's in there, which is Chapter 4, I think, of the report. But it's all nonsense. It's all bullshit, right? As Barr said it's all bullshit because it is all bullshit,
Yeah.
And Trump knows this. They say it's all bullshit, but here's the point, right? Under our system, the states play a very have a constitutional role to play in how you certify electors, how the vote is conducted and counted, right, and then how electors are certified and a victor is declared, right. The executive branch in our system has zero role to play in that, and it's certainly the Department of Justice has zero role to play in that. What Trump was trying to do was abuse the power of the Department of Justice to interfere in the constitutional processes of other branches of government, other parts of the U.S. government.
Yeah, so
and this is a huge point, right? Because a lot of the people you're talking about who are supposedly constitutional conservatives who are mired in myths about January 6th and lies about it, right? Well, listen, buddy, you can't be a constitutional conservative if you're in favor of this, or you're going to make excuses for this, because this is the opposite of constitutional conservatism. This is trying to shred the Constitution, you know?
Yeah, this goes back to what I just said about like understanding the civics. Is that when I heard that Raffensperger call initially, I'm thinking like, man, the fact that he was like looking for votes and he was like doing all this kind of weird, you know, repeating these conspiracies, and that was kind of, you know, that was a bad thing. And then after, because when I started getting steeped in the J6 stuff, now I'm starting to read like, what is the structure of the DOJ? How does, you know, how are offices and departments created?
You know, reposting information that really paints targets on these officials' backs all the way across all the swing states, and then of course leading up to Vice President Pence himself repeatedly. You know, I mean, that's also another, by the way, another rebuttal to Trump's behavior during the attack, or immediately preceding the attack and then during the attack. The first actual tweet that he puts out is at 2:24, where he attacks Vice President Pence right in the middle of the attack. Doesn't have the courage to do what was necessary, right? The stuff that comes after that, yeah, he does say stuff about, you know, stay peaceful, that kind of thing after that, right? But it's not him, right? It's his advisors and his daughter and everybody else putting words in his mouth and trying him. Now he does tweet out some of the stuff, but the point is, like, the first blush at it, the first attack at it from him, the first instance of him in his own words is always the most aggressive, the most, you know, zealous, the most, you know, trying to rile people up. You know?
And I think I have to go back and check the times, but I think that isn't that "Stay Peaceful" tweet that might come like minutes after I think Ashley Babbitt was already shot.
I'd have to look on the timing on that, but yeah, I mean, basically, people are trying desperately to, you know, I mean, and by the way, he you know, he keeps holding Ashley Babbitt up as a martyr for the cause, and it is tragic that she was shot and killed on January 6th. It's awful, right? But she was shot climbing through a window, you know, just feet away from members of Congress and others, right? When trying to lead, you know, at the forefront of this mob that's trying to go through. It's awful that she was shot and killed. It's tragic. It's also tragic that she believed all this QAnon nonsense that Trump endorsed, you know? Yeah, I mean, Trump, as president, is given multiple opportunities to knock down the QAnon conspiracy theory, right? And he doesn't, you know? He does the opposite. He actually validates the core beliefs of QAnon. You know, he's asked at one point right from the podium, you know, they say, you know, what do you think about these people who think you're trying to head off this satanic cult of pedophiles of Democrats and others like that? And he says, well, would it be such a bad thing if that's what I was doing? You know, I mean, it's like, this is crazy stuff, you know. But here's the thing, right? That I want to get across to anybody who's watching this, right? Think about how dangerous it is for a president of the United States to validate the craziest shit you see online, right? Because that's what this guy does, and he does it over and over again, you know. And now this isn't just some guy out there that Savannah Guthrie said during an interview with him. This isn't your uncle, right? This isn't your crazy uncle doing this. This is the president of the United States saying this nonsense that's percolating online that's dangerous. That stuff's legitimate, you know? And so that's a big part of the problem, I would say.
Yeah, listening to Short talk about how I think he was getting emails, or actually, wait, it might have been Rosen too, getting emails about like, I need you to like look into this. And it's like the Italian guy talking about the satellites flipping votes, and it's like, Jesus Christ.
It's dumb, right? I mean, it's really dumb stuff. I mean, it's really stupid. You know, man, that's the other thing people aren't supposed to say, but I'll say it, you know. This is really stupid stuff.
It is stupid, right? Yes.
Stupid. It's stupid, right? People won't say that, but you have to say that, right? Because it is dumb, right? This is an insult to the intelligence of anybody who has any kind of intellect, you know? This is really, really dumb stuff, you know? So
yeah, even like all the Ruby Freeman and Shamos stuff, like they did all of this rigging, all this conspiratorial stuff. Why the fuck did they give you the tapes then? Because another thing that I wish people would realize sometimes is when they allege stuff, it happens a lot with conspiracies, right? Sometimes people will allege what would be the largest conspiracy in the history of the country, right? The idea that somebody is, with top-down coordination, rigging elections across several, that would probably be one of the largest conspiracies and most impactful, maybe in all of world history, in all of human history, and the evidence is non-existent, right? You're alleging something so grand, right? If this was the case, right? If the Clintons are killing people like Seth Rich and protecting Jeffrey Epstein and all this, why are they giving you the tapes? Why would the State Farm Arena tapes be visible? You don't think they would take care of the security cameras in the corner of the room, right?
Right.
Or people,
yeah. But there's an old logical principle that's very well known. That's been known for thousands of years. That you're extrapolating on there, which is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Right.
Oh, I've changed that now. I just say extraordinary claims require at least any evidence at all. Give me one thing.
I was going to follow up with saying these extraordinary claims require just a scintilla of evidence.
Yeah.
Anything whatsoever. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's the point, right? They're building these monumental sandcastles on not even a grain of sand, you know. And that's a real big problem, you know, because that's why it doesn't even qualify as conspiracy theories, right? This is just rabid conspiracism, you know.
Yeah, because they can just lie with impunity over anything and just keep repeating it over and over and over, and people just like believe it, even though, like I said, a lot of these were debunked like the day of. Like the Dominion stuff was. That's another thing I'll do now when I'm on stage. Just like, oh, you think Dominion was rigged? Go ahead and say that, right? Because the content creators know that they got sued, and they know that they won't say it. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, or Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss won 148 million, I think, from Giuliani, and that was another thing Owen Schroyer said. He's like, yeah, the ballots were ran 3 times in Georgia. I was like, oh, who ran those? Will you say who ran it? He's like, well, it wasn't Ruby or Shay, it was somebody else. Like, oh, okay, we're changing the names now.
I mean, yeah, again, I don't even know if patience is the right word, because I could, like somebody like that, I don't think I could, you know, debate in good faith. I mean, I think that type of stuff is just so dishonest.
Yeah,
and so.
But half the electorate, like. My guess would be over 80% of Republicans probably believe the State Farm video. I'm sure there are liberals that even think the State Farm video maybe is real.
Alright, I'm taking a break.